Well, good morning, everyone. Really good to see everybody today, and it's an honor and privilege to welcome Governor Newsom here to Hyatt Power Plant, as well as the California Department of Water Resources Director Namath. We're here in Hyatt Power Plant, which is part of the California State Water Project, and specifically the Lake Oroville complex. Lake Oroville is an extremely important facility for the state in that it supplies water to 27 million Californians throughout the state, from here in Butte County and many communities from here to Southern California. Where we're at right now, we're 670 feet below the top of the dam and then 500 feet below the lake elevation. So what we do with this facility is we release water from the lake, run it through these turbines, and generate clean electricity for the state's electric grid. This plant has the capability of producing 800 megawatts of power, which is equivalent to the power needed for a city the size of San Francisco. Right now, with the drought conditions, the lake is about half full. And so given the ongoing drought, we do have some challenges in maintaining generation from this facility. In fact, last year, because of the low lake elevations, we had to suspend operation in August. And so I'm going to turn it over to Director Namath, who's going to talk more about the drought conditions in the state.
Thank you, Ted, and good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. As Ted Craddock mentioned, this facility is really important from a water supply perspective to the entire state of California, not just communities from Silicon Valley down to San Diego, but also throughout the Central Valley. This water from the State Water Project supports about 750,000 acres of irrigated agriculture here in California. As Ted mentioned, conditions change when we really start to experience the intensity of the drought. In 2021, the Feather River Canyon received very little water. It was one of the driest spots in the state. And consequently, for the first time in the project's history, we were not able to run these turbines late in the season, in the summer season. Which of course is a real challenge when we have rising temperatures, extreme heat events, and you start to see the thread of climate resiliency in how we manage water, how we make sure that we have enough power to support California, and wildfire risk. We're making a lot of improvements. This year was better in this particular watershed. But one of the examples of the uncertainties of climate is the fact that at the neighboring watershed that supports Shasta Reservoir actually was very dry this year. So for our operations here, we're going to continue to operate our system to generate power deep into the season. Also make sure that we are providing water at good temperatures for salmon species on the Feather River. And what's helping us do that is investments that we made last year and this year to improve our ability to forecast what kind of snowpack turns into actual water into rivers, streams, and reservoirs. That is an essential adaptation strategy for California because we know we may, in this part of the state, continue to get on average the same quantities of rain, but we don't know if it's going to come as rain or as snow. And we know that with dwindling snowpack, we need to manage that water supply ever better. So some of the new technologies are what we call aerial snow observations, where we take flights up the Feather River watershed, and we can measure in 3-meter grids all the way to the crest of the Sierra Nevada, the actual water content of that snow down to the inch, which is a phenomenal set of information that will really help us understand better as climate creates warming temperatures and our snowpack retreats further up the slope of the Sierra, how much water is there, and then how best to manage that water, not only for people, farms, and fish, but how this particular system also participates in supporting the electrical grid in California. One of the other Areas we're investigating this year is the effect of the Dixie Fire, which was the largest wildfire in California and very much impacted this watershed, how the aftermath of that fire affects water quality, and how snowpack behaves in a watershed. This is all a part of climate adaptation and learning as we go, and making sure that new science and technology is informing the way in which we make management decisions about water supply for people, for our environment, for our economy, and how that also works in tandem with investments the state needs to make in terms of a reliable electrical grid as we make our transition into a future-proof, climate-resilient California. And with that, I have the honor and pleasure to introduce Governor Gavin Newsom. Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks, Ted, and thank you all for being here. I think we're here. It brings out the inner child. It's kind of cool. So let's establish that as a level set. Number two, we're here to really talk about the integration of challenges that we have, the stacking of challenges, the simultaneous challenges that we face as a state, as we face in the West Coast of the United States, as it relates to the issues of scarcity, as it relates to the issues of drought, as well as energy reliability. And I think this is a perfect example of that reality and the challenges and opportunities that present themselves. Though first, let me just state a couple points. One is appreciation for where we are in a different way. This facility in many ways built California. It built the economy of the United States. In so many ways, this facility is a manifestation of America's power and prowess and its capacity to build the largest middle class the world has ever seen. And it's not an exaggeration to state that. 27 million people, as Carla said, are supported by just this facility. This facility was built when I was born. It's old, 1967. Was a picture, we went downstairs just a moment ago, a site of where then Governor Reagan went and visited this site in 1968. You can see the old Westinghouse logo up there, a company that no longer exists. This is the original equipment. You recall then actor Ronald Reagan promoting on behalf of Westinghouse some of their products. It's just an extraordinary testament to America, to America's promise, to California, to California's promise, to the dream, both the American and the California dream. So much of it attached to this facility and its history. Also, this history is marked by tragedy, and it would be wrong of me 50 plus years later not to acknowledge the 70 people that lost their lives building this facility. 70 human beings that lost their lives at this site. And so I mark that as a point of consideration, and in many respects, it's a point of contrast to where we are today. Big projects like this, they're hard to do. Big projects like this are becoming more and more scarce. It's not just the size and scope and scale of this project, but it's the complexity, it's the engineering, it's the innovation that marks so much of the history of this project. And it's in that spirit that we're here, because that's the kind of innovation, that's the kind of work that we need to advance today to address the weather whiplash that we're now experiencing, to address the extremes that we're experiencing for the first time in our lives. The fact that this facility shut down last August, that never happened before. Just never happened before. It was imagined, but we never thought it would be realized in our lifetime. It happened. And the prospects that it will happen again are very real, particularly because we had the driest January, the driest February, and driest March in California history. We talk so often, people say, well, we just need to build 100 new dams. We also need something to fill the dams up with. And when you have the driest January, the driest February, and the driest March in history, those extremes, extreme dries, and yes, recognizing the extreme wet weather with the atmospheric rivers that require us to have a different approach to hydrology. That requires us to have a different approach than the design of a system that was designed for a world that no longer exists. And so we want to take a more adaptive model, a more flexible model. We want to build off the architecture that we inherited, but we recognize that we have to localize solutions in ways we haven't in the past. There's 7,700 systems that deliver water in the state of California. 7,700. It's a system of systems. It's not one system. So you got to get your arms and head around the capacity to how we deliver water in the state. It's done traditionally very locally. It's about a $33+ billion spend on an annual basis. 85% of that is local. It's not federal, it's not state. So when we think about the drought, we think about resiliency, flexibility. For us, it's truly bottom up. And that's recognizing the unique conditions that persist and exist all throughout the state of California. So our approach is marked by that consciousness. We put out a water resilience portfolio with 100 specific action items, and we're funding them in historic ways. Last year, working with the legislature, we got $5.2 billion to support our efforts on groundwater replenishment, groundwater recycling, new conveyance strategies, storage strategies, new emergency interventions to address scarcity as it relates to smaller systems in this state. This year, we're asking the legislature for another $750 million, likely more. I don't want to preview too much, but we'll have a May revise where you will see additional investments into immediate issues related to the drought around scarcity, medium and long term. We're not waiting to do bonds because we have the resources to do more through general fund contributions. And so we are moving aggressively. Remarkable team that led us out of the last drought. Now we're entering, again, this third year. Officially, we're in the third year of this new drought. And it's going to require all of us, to be more creative, more flexible, and to have an open hand, not just a closed fist. And it's in that spirit that I'm back here. And I'm back here because I've been up here in this part of the state many, many times. And I said to the folks up in Butte County after camp, we got your back. We're here for the long haul. And we followed through on our commitments, and we're going to follow through on our commitments to continue to do more and do better for the people in the northern part of the state of California, wildfire preparedness and drought preparedness, and to continue to make sure this part of the state is not forgotten in terms of investments that we're making. And so all of those reasons, that's why we chose this location here today. I want to thank everybody in California. As we moved out of the last drought, we came into this drought more prepared than ever. Conservation becoming increasingly a way of life. In fact, 16% lower per capita consumption coming into this drought compared to the last drought. So already there's been a big shift in the state of California in terms of reducing water and not wasting water. That said, we still have to do a little bit more. We've asked districts all up and down the state, based upon local conditions, to address their issues locally through adapting their contingency drought plans. We did that through an executive order a couple of weeks ago. We have voluntary reductions in this state. Some parts of the state are exceeding the voluntary numbers. Other parts of the state haven't. We'll work through that over the course of the next number of months by increasing our outreach and communications, by continuing to work and partner with our local agencies and systems to do tailored messaging. Our Save Our Water campaign is getting into another, we're investing an unprecedented amount of money to get that campaign up and operational, working with influencers, meeting people where they are, not just trying to sell down our Save the Water strategies from Sacramento, but new creative strategies for outreach, communication, and education. We are entering into this drought as prepared as we can be, but we recognize the stress that everybody's been under the last few years, and now the stress that's upon us as we enter into fire season and working our way through this third year of drought. That said, in closing, I want folks to know this state is investing resources at an unprecedented level, and we're investing them with more targeted interventions that we think will pay greater dividends than we've seen in the past, moving into the summer months and moving us out of these conditions. So with that, again, honored to be here, proud to be here, grateful for the leadership. Ted, thank you for all your hard work, and Carla and our entire team. And of course, we're here to answer any questions.
Hi, Governor. My name is Alex Stutson. I'm with North State Public Radio. I'm just curious, what sort of aid programs is the state planning to be operating in terms of providing assistance to small communities whose wells have dried up, who may not have the same resources as some of the larger places here in the state?
Big part of the $5.2 billion that was approved last year, that's money that's going out as we speak, is to do just that. We are monitoring currently, and Carla can talk more specifically about this, and I'll invite her up, but we are monitoring over 100 systems, small systems along the lines you've described, and providing technical assistance and direct relief grants that came from that appropriation. I'm asking the legislature to do even more in direct relief grants so that we can continue our efforts to consolidate smaller systems, provide emergency water supplies for those systems that are facing real acute scarcity, and also provide technical support and investments for new well drilling and the like. With that, Carla can perhaps amplify a little bit more along those lines.
Thank you. Yeah, the department has distributed nearly $200 million in relief to small communities, about 60 projects thus far. That was money as a result of last year's budget, and there will be additional funding to do that. It is things like digging community wells. Also, what's important is in the last executive order, the governor directed local counties to make sure that they are permitting any new wells, deeper wells, agricultural wells. They're doing so with an understanding of the impacts surrounding them, particularly on domestic and smaller wells that communities rely on, which was a big part of the problem during the previous drought. So additional dollars out the door to do, as the governor said, consolidate systems, provide emergency drinking water, drill additional wells, and to provide state water project water to those kinds of communities when we know they have these challenges with groundwater during very dry times.
Thank you.
And forgive me for belaboring it, but I'd be remiss if I didn't add a critical component that didn't exist 3 years ago. When I got here, we were still debating what we do as it relates to safe, clean, affordable drinking for those small systems. And it's one thing to have one-time money, it's another to have ongoing operating money. We were able to work with the legislature, and we were able to get over $130+ million a year for ongoing sustainable funding to help address those issues in the long term, not just the short term.
Governor Newsom, Ryan with KRCR Channel 7 here. Nice to see you again up here in Butte County. And you might have just touched a little bit upon this, but we are, in the North State specifically, a very agriculturally driven community. Yep. We have farmers this year being told they're not going to be receiving a fraction of the water that they actually need. I know if you talk about Oroville here, Lake Oroville, a huge tourism economic thing here in the area, and they're not getting the same tourism. There's a lot of different aspects to the areas that we're talking about the drought here at the North State. What can you tell those people then, these farmers who say that they're not getting enough water, the city who's saying they're not getting enough tourism because there's not being enough done to conserve water in this area?
It's a question that's being asked all over the west coast of the United States. We've been in a mega drought since arguably 2000. I've been talking to my colleagues, not just here in California, but all over the western United States, talking to my colleagues in states like Colorado, having early wildfires, issues, of course, in states well-known, well-described, in places like Arizona, New Mexico, obviously even north of California, which is remarkable to see what's happening on the border in Klamath, on the other side of the border, and the scarcity that I never thought I'd honestly see in my lifetime. I mean, this facility right now is operating 50% capacity. It's about 66, 67% of average, which means about 100 feet less water than otherwise would normally be. That's a reality. And so in a scarce environment, we've got to address those recreational issues that you described. We got to address the economic realities. The 925, if you add it all up, this is 800 megawatts. The entire facility that's connected to this site, it's about 925 megawatts. As was noted, that's more power than power up all the city and county of San Francisco. So there's all of these issues that are competing against each other. What we're trying to do, including fish and wildlife, temperature issues, we're trying to create a different paradigm, a different balance, moving from the old binaries. Let me be specific. About 3 weeks ago, we announced something that has been illusory for decades in the state, and that's voluntary agreements with those interests, with ag interests, water users, agricultural community coming together, with environmentalists coming together, cities, counties, not on the coast, not just those up here in North State or even the Central Valley. And we put together terms of a different kind of flexible arrangement. And I'm really proud of that. We're building on those voluntary agreements. We still have more work to do, and our job now is to implement it. We're coming to the board, or rather the table, with more resources than we've ever had to address nature-based solutions, to address water scarcity, including providing more support and flexibility for some of our farmers, providing more grants and relief as well. But it's a challenging and difficult time. And so what I would say is I'm deeply respectful and empathetic. At the same time, I'm deeply humbled by the fact that we're entering into this third-year drought with more flexibility and more collaboration than I have seen in decades in my time in elected office.
Thank you for that. And my last question before I go, if we can pivot a little bit to some early release laws that you obviously went into effect a couple years ago. There is some concern, specifically in Shasta County, the Modoc County area. There were some very high profile cases when it came to people placed in the prison system because of some severe sexual assaults, harassments, whatever it may be. Those people are now potentially going to be let out in the coming years, and there's some safety concerns in those areas when it comes to that. What can you address to those people when it comes to those concerns?
Well, as you know, the voters of the state of California approved many years ago, well before I got here, Proposition 57. There was an opportunity for the voters to reconsider that. They rejected that. And so in that is a rehabilitative framework, an opportunity to focus on rehabilitation and credits, which, by the way, is not unique to Prop 57. It's predated even Prop 57. It just expanded that opportunity for more prisoners. That said, there was a very public engagement with CDCR recently, and they have the ability to adjudicate that public comment and that feedback and the opportunity to make adjustments. What I also think is critical in this environment is we also talk more openly about the importance of prosecutors prosecuting people. So many folks have been plead down that weren't prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. So it requires all of us, again, talk about moving away from closed fists to a more collaborative and honest discussion, to look across the spectrum of efforts, enforcement, prosecution, investigations, and by the way, hundreds of millions of dollars. I didn't wait till this was a screaming headline. We announced many months ago investments, hundreds of millions of dollars, and more investments to DAs, to police, grant programs to cities and counties, large and small, to continue our enforcement efforts and to continue our prosecution. I've never been part of the defund police movement. Don't confuse me with that movement. I've always supported our law enforcement, and I've always supported our efforts to prosecute. I also believe in second chances, and also believe people have the capacity to reform, and they have the capacity to learn from their mistakes. And so I'm not going to ever back away from that either. But I think we can move beyond the highly charged political rhetoric in this space and focus on what is foundational in any free society, and that's public safety as a top priority.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, Governor Newsom. I'm Jafet from Action News Now. Nice to meet you. I'm going to look at my notes here for the questions that I have. One of them, we're hoping that there's enough water this summer, hopefully. But worst case scenario, what are we looking at this summer in terms of restrictions for water? Can you foresee a ban on watering any lawns here in California?
Well, as you know, for large industrial parks and businesses that have purely decorative lawns, we've already moved in that direction. As it relates to residences, we currently are working with our drought contingency plans and partners at the local level to make determinations based upon hydrology and the realities in local parts of the state. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. As it relates to worst-case scenario, we're modeling all those scenarios, I assure you. We're entering in this year with the expectation we can move through this year without those draconian impacts. That's the hope and expectation. Now, there's some renewed enthusiasm about the last few days and last week, a little bit of rain. It's little, too late. I don't want anyone to get overly enthusiastic about that. But I think the approach everybody's taking, these voluntary agreements, the recognition at the local level that they needed to update their contingency plans, which they've done, provide more tools in the toolkit entering this third-year drought than we had in previous years. And I'm confident we can get through without that kind of draconian mandate.
Okay, that's good. And I just had one more question for you. We have an assemblyman here, James Gallagher. He posted on his social media claiming that today's speech is, quote, just a shiny object distraction, adding that you don't want to talk about crime, homelessness, and housing affordability. What do you say to that? Just to give you a chance to speak on that.
How can you respond to someone making a statement before I even made a statement? I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Michael Weber. I'm with Chico Enterprises Record. Thank you, Mr. Newsom, for your time. We have another comment from Mr. James Gallagher from Yuba City. He said in a press release this morning that mismanagement is contributing to the state drought, citing that the site's reservoir project has not yet been built. How do you respond to his comment on reservoirs not being built?
Well, we've been active, and in fact, I'm very proud of the work we've done on sites. I'm not aware of any work he's done on that project, but I'm very aware of the work our administration's been doing on that project. We've been meeting consistently. We're making tremendous progress. We've been working with the Biden administration to actually draw down federal support. Carla and her team have been very active and participatory, and we're actually going to get that project done, something I've long supported. With that, thank you guys. If I were you, I'd figure out some way to get downstairs because those are the coolest parts of this facility. But nonetheless, maybe it's because I'm from San Francisco. I've had enough being hundreds of feet underwater. So I'll bid you all adieu. Thank you all very, very much.